What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of the Fantasy Football League Winners. Today is Saturday, June 17th. My name is Will. Joining me is my co-host, Eric. Eric, how are you feeling today, dog?
I am really excited. I'm pretty hyped about this video, something that we haven't done before, something that I hope maybe we can turn into a series if you all like it. So let us know down in the comments below, but I won't spoil it. Will, I'll let the people know what's going on.
Absolutely. So we're planning on starting this new series. We want this to be called Fantasy Court. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be bringing up a player, hopefully every week, every so often, whenever it is we do these videos, really. We're going to be bringing up a player, and we're going to have a defense, and we're going to have a prosecution, and we're going to figure out if that player is worth having on your roster in fantasy, what you should do with them, stuff of that nature. And this week's episode, the defendant is going to be Mr. Najee Harris himself. You saw it in the thumbnail. I am going to be the defense. Eric will be acting as the prosecution. And Eric, you want to kick this off with what our claim is going to be for my client?
Yeah, so for me, in my humble opinion, Najee Harris is an overrated fantasy asset, and he just isn't that good of a running back. He's an inefficient runner and receiver whose fantasy production has been completely dependent on volume. And he hasn't just been inefficient compared to the rest of the league, but also compared to his own teammates. So even if you want to argue about poor offensive line play or a low ADOT from Pittsburgh's quarterbacks, other Steelers running backs perform better than him in the same situation. I also don't believe that his injury last season played as much of a role in his disappointing performance as most people are giving it credit for. What is your response?
Okay, my response to that, Mr. Najee Harris has already been plagued with this sort of inefficient tag. It's only his third year in the league, but he's been plagued with it nonetheless. And we're here to talk about whether Najee really is that efficient compared to other players on his team, a claim that I believe is severely overblown. Also, I believe that inefficiency doesn't really matter as much in fantasy, but we're going to talk about it because in certain situations, I feel like inefficiency isn't really that big of a knock towards Najee Harris or towards any running back in fantasy, really. So we're going to take a look at things like Najee Harris's volume, things like Najee Harris's role in this offense, and I just believe that Najee Harris is somebody that you do want on your roster. He's somebody you should be looking for, especially if you're looking to win now, because there are better days ahead for Najee Harris on the Pittsburgh Steelers.
All right. I hear that. But I'm ready to counter you once again with my opening argument, specifically focused on the fact that he's only productive due to his volume. So let's get into the details here. In his rookie year, the Steelers were the pass-heaviest team in the league with Ben Roethlisberger at the helm, and he couldn't throw the ball more than 10 yards down the field. Because of this, Najee Harris led all running backs in routes run, targets, and receptions. He was also given a ton of work on the ground. So he had led the league in snap share, opportunity share, weighted opportunities, and was second amongst running backs in carries. Even with the most volume of any running back in the entire NFL, he still only finished as the RB9 in points per game in 2021. And then in 2022, Harris was still borderline top 10 in all of the same categories. 10th in opportunity share, 8th in weighted opportunities, 5th in carries, 10th in team run plays per game, and 14th in routes run. Despite still being amongst the league lead in total volume, he only managed to finish as the RB19 in points per game, tied with Ezekiel Elliott. So quite literally, if he doesn't have the league lead in touches, he's a mediocre running back for fantasy.
Okay, no, that's a fair argument. Now, my response to this opening argument, I'm not here to argue the stone cold facts that the prosecution just gave here. I can't argue with any of that. Those are the facts. That is what it is, and it's true. Najee Harris has been given some of the most opportunity out of any running back in the league, and to some pretty underwhelming results. Not bad, but underwhelming for sure, I will say. But let's take a look at some context behind these statistics and what's changed since then. Najee did indeed benefit from Big Ben and that sort of style of short ball offense that they were playing. And that is a very true fact. But what I have seen last year was a team that wanted to commit more to the run game. They wanted to throw the ball less. They wanted to run the ball more. They brought in guys like Jaylen Warren to keep people like Najee Harris fresh, especially when he was dealing with that injury. But we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. But I do want to say that I feel like any running back, any offense is gonna kind of struggle when you're still trying to find your offensive identity. They were still trying to figure out who their quarterback was. They started last season with Mitch Trubisky. That didn't quite work out. They made the switch over to Kenny Pickett, and then it just took some time for things to really settle in. But when things did settle in, the offense got more efficient. Things started to pick up, and things did get better for this offense when Kenny Pickett did take charge. Now, do I believe Kenny Pickett's a world breaker? Do I think he's making the difference? No. But I feel like any offense that gets any level of consistency is going to get better over time, no matter what. Now, when we're taking a look at the offensive line that Najee Harris had, now we're going to look at PFF. I don't think PFF is the greatest measurement, but also it is a measurement nonetheless, and it's something we can use to keep track of where these offensive lines finished. In 2021, the Steelers had a whopping 26th best offensive line in the league, so that only 6 offensive lines were worse than them. And by the end of 2022, they had moved up to a world-breaking 16th. So they were literally middle of the pack, middle of the league in terms of offensive line. And that's going to be tough for any running back to be efficient in that sort of situation, especially when you are the focal point of this offense, which, based on those touch numbers that Eric gave us, Najee Harris is very much a focal point of this offense. He's touching the ball more than just about everybody else on the team outside of the center. So I expect that to change, and I expect that to change extremely soon for the Steelers. They recently acquired guards Isaac Seumalo and Nate Herbig to bring onto the offensive line. They recently drafted rookie offensive tackle Broderick Jones out of Georgia, and they drafted his teammate, the best blocking tight end in the draft this year, Darnell Washington. So, me personally, I'm expecting a lot of 12 personnel coming out of the Steelers. I'm expecting a lot of heavy runs, a lot of just smash-mouth, old-school football for Najee, and I think he's going to thrive in that environment. I think that fits his style of play. I think that fits his body type. And I feel like if they do that and he is able to thrive in that environment, not only do you have a bell cow running back on your team, one of the few in the league, might I add, you also get a bell cow running back with first-round pedigree who's finally playing behind the best offensive line in his career. With that also being said, I know efficiency is kind of a cute rating, it's something you want to see in running backs, but at the end of the day, volume is king in fantasy football. Since 2012, there have been 70 running backs to finish any given season with 300 touches or more. 43 of those 70 finished as a top 5 running back in full PPR scoring. Only 11 of them failed to finish in the top 10. The average finish for these running backs was running back 5.6. As you said, Najee had 381 touches in 2021 and 312 touches in 2022, and that's in spite of a Linsfrack injury and Jaylen Warren. So there's no reason to really believe that history is not going to repeat itself in this situation, and I think Najee's going to benefit from that going forward.
All right. A very, very detailed and thorough response. I like it. There was a lot of information in there that I can agree with. There was definitely some inconsistency in the quarterback play, whether it be Mr. Trubisky or Kenny Pickett. And obviously, like you mentioned, they did pick up at the latter half of the season. But you also mentioned that the offensive line play was poor, and that's going to limit his ability, Najee's ability. And I do understand that, and I don't think you're incorrect. But in my next argument here, I will kind of counter that in saying that he's not only an inefficient runner and receiver compared to the rest of the league, but also compared to his own teammates that are dealing with the exact same situation behind that exact same offensive line. So let's compare Najee Harris to Jaylen Warren in a lot of these, I think, very telling stats for their performance last year. So let's talk about fantasy points per opportunity. Najee Harris was at 0.69, which was ranked 63rd in the league. Jaylen Warren at 0.85, which was 18th. Yards per reception. Najee Harris 5.6, which was 30th in the league. Jaylen Warren at 7.6. I'm getting all these stats from Player Profiler. For whatever reason, Jaylen Warren wasn't ranked in this one, but still 2 full yards higher in yards per reception, very significant. True yards per carry, Najee Harris 59th in the league, Jaylen Warren 12th. Breakaway run rate, Najee Harris 51st in the league, Jaylen Warren 16th. Yards created per touch, Najee Harris 45th in the league, Jaylen Warren 5th overall. And expected points added, EPA, which is basically saying, are you helping your team? What are you helping your team to do when you're getting the ball? Najee Harris, 154th in the league. Jaylen Warren, 2nd. So we're talking about a guy in Jaylen Warren who didn't get nearly the draft capital, nearly the hype, isn't the same size, isn't quote unquote, the same athleticism, shouldn't be in the same realm as Najee Harris, physically, talent-wise, any of that stuff. And yet he is vastly and dramatically outperforming Najee Harris in nearly every aspect and every stat that I just touched on. I think that Najee Harris lacks creativity and explosiveness as a runner, both in between the tackles and in space. He's not a good tackle breaker. He doesn't create big plays. He gets what the line blocks for him and nothing else because he can't create on his own. And as evidenced by the EPA, he's hurting his team every time he touches the ball.
Okay. It's tough to argue with that, I will say. Those are some pretty damning statistics, I will say. But I want to say that Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren are two separate players that I feel like teams will game plan for differently. They're not going to get treated the same. So while these statistics are true, I still think the teams aren't going to plan for a player like Jaylen Warren as much as they are going to plan for a player like Najee Harris. And that's kind of shown through some of the things like players that played in the box when Najee Harris was in the backfield. On average, it was 6.6, and this was the 28th highest in the league. Not the greatest, but also, not something to shake a stick at. And for a stacked front carry percentage, that was actually 12.1%, the 29th highest in the league. And taking a look at Jaylen Warren, the average player in the boxes against him was 6.4, which was the 42nd highest in the league, and a stacked front percentage of 6.5%, which was the 49th in the league. And furthermore, although it doesn't really happen all that often, this isn't the first time in NFL history that a backup rusher has actually, rushed over a yard more per carry than the primary back in their offense. In fact, there were 23 other times in the last 22 years that this happened, and I actually have a list of those players thanks to Fantasy Index. I'll make sure that's linked down in the description below. But I'm going to read off some of these names. 2001, we had Travis Minor. 2003, we had Lee Suggs. 2003, we also had Ontario Smith in Minnesota. 2004, we had Melwood Moore out of Minnesota as well. 2004, we had Steven Jackson in St. Louis. 2005, Ryan Moats, Jarius Norwood, Pierre Thomas, Tashard Choice, Arian Foster, Evan Royster, Stephen Ridley, Andre Ellington, Mike James, Jerick McKinnon, Kerwin Williams, Carlos Williams, DeAndre Washington, Jalen Richard, Aaron Jones, Alvin Kamara, James Cook, and then Jaylen Warren, of course. Now, there are some names on that list for sure, I will say. There are some great names on that list. But are we willing to say that Jaylen Warren is also amongst those great names in that list? Because a lot of those guys did not end up doing anything the next year or furthermore in their career. They just ended up kind of being middling out and backup running backs like they were drafted to be, or in this case, like Jaylen Warren was undrafted to be. It's really levels to this when it comes to running backs in these backfields, how teams plan for them and how teams value them. And the value behind Najee Harris versus the value behind Jaylen Warren are severely different in my opinion, and I believe in the team's opinion as well.
That is a good argument, sir. I do appreciate your response. I think that you make a decent point in terms of the team's investment and what that means for the future going forward, and especially when you bring out the box count data in reference to just what these running backs are facing when they get on the field compared to one another. I think there is a significant difference there. But this leads me into my third and final argument here, mostly in reference to when people say that the disappointing year last year was due to the injury. From what I've found so far, there was minimal difference in Najee Harris's individual performance from his rookie year to last year in terms of underlying metrics aside from the volume. And also there was very little discernible difference in his performance during the portion of the year where he was quote unquote injured versus when he was healthy. I'm going to be reading off some statistics from a chart created by Nick Ercolano over at BDGE. He just put out a video talking about Najee Harris as well. I would highly suggest you go check that out. But he put in here his yards per carry for his rookie season was at 3.9. His yards per carry during his foot injury for those 8 games was at 3.3. And his yards per carry after the foot injury when he was healthy was at 4.1. So yes, he was a little bit hampered with the injury, but the rookie season and after when he was healthy was about the same. But then when we get into missed tackles forced per attempt, 18.6 rookie season, 20.4 while he was injured, 20.1 after he was healthy again. So basically the same all the way through. And then we start to see where it really declines. His breakaway run rate his rookie season was 3.9%, 2.8% while he was injured, 2.4% while he was quote-unquote healthy for the back end of the season. His elusive run rating, also in the same kind of category, 71.8% in his rookie season, got worse while he was injured, but still remained worse while he was healthy the back end of last season. And again, same for yards after contact per attempt, 2.9 to 2.7 to 2.8. So basically the argument that I'm trying to get at here is that he wasn't severely hampered by this injury.
Mm-hmm.
He was basically producing at the same underlying level that we saw during his rookie season. It was just a lack of volume and a lack of ability that I think is what led to his disappointing season last year. And like I mentioned at the top, if he doesn't get that top tier volume, he's not going to be a top end fantasy asset.
I can agree with that. I think that while, like you said, there is little discernible difference, there is still a difference nonetheless. There was still, like you said, signs that he was hampered, but not a huge amount of signs. And I have to kind of attribute a lot of that to situation as well. I think that the situation itself didn't really get that much better in that amount of time as well. So it is tough to say because now going into this year, I think that, like I said earlier, Najee has the best offensive line that he's ever had in his career. So I think that if we go into this season and we go through this season and he's not able to perform behind this line as well, he's not able to make things happen, he's just not able to get it done, I think that's going to be a lot more damning than really trying to measure these last 2 years up against Najee Harris when he has had to go up against as many obstacles as he has. This offensive line, with it being 26 in the league his rookie year and having Big Ben at quarterback, of course, he was dumping the ball off to him. That was an advantage. But having Big Ben at quarterback was not a good thing for that offense whatsoever. Like I said, last year, them having a QB carousel, not really having offensive identity until like the last 9 games of the season after the bye week. Also not great, but encouraging going forward because I believe that this team is stepping into the right path. They've got the actual quarterback. They've got the situation, and things are getting better. In terms of breakaway run rate, in terms of his creativity, I can't exactly speak towards that 100% at the end of the day. We can speak on what we've seen, and what we've seen is largely what Eric is saying. Najee Harris has lacked some creativity in his running, but we're hoping that having an offensive line where he can maybe be able to hit the second level more often than he is, we maybe ought to actually get a chance of seeing what kind of a running back Najee Harris is, and more of the running back we saw back when he was at Alabama and was being more creative, was making guys miss, was running through tackles, So it's really coming from I think there really are brighter days ahead. The past was, I can't even really say the past was bad because you still got a good running back out of Najee Harris these last 2 years. But I'm saying that this year he has an opportunity to be great, and this is where we'll actually get to see it, and that's what I'm hoping for going forward.
All right. So that'll kind of end our scripted arguments, our prepared arguments. Since we don't have a jury in front of us, I know that you guys, the audience, can be our jury. So let us know down in the comments below who you think should have won in this court case, whether you would argue for Najee Harris or against Najee Harris, all that good stuff. If you think we missed anything, put it all down in the comments below. But now let's get into just a more casual discussion about how we actually feel. We don't have to pick a side necessarily. How do you actually feel about Najee Harris going into this season and beyond?
Being honest, I'm worried because, like you said, I do want to see him do more because he has had the most opportunity out of any running back in the league. And that's not even a joke. That is, he's had the most opportunity. He's had the most touches, point blank. It's just really I want to see the Steelers take a step up. I think Mike Tomlin is sort of stuck in his ways as a coach because he wants to have that bell cow running back. He's shown us that every single year in and year out. It doesn't matter who's back there. He wants one guy to be the guy. And he wants that to be Najee Harris. But it's just a matter of this team needs to get better. They need to improve because they have been really bad. It's to the point where they're celebrating because they're getting winning seasons. You know what I'm saying? Like they're getting positive records. Mike Tomlin keeping the streak going. And I think he wants to continue that. And if he does, this team needs to improve. And the offensive line is where that starts. And they've made some huge strides this offseason. So I'm hoping for the best.
Yeah, there's definitely some signs or some reasons for optimism, I think, in this offense as a whole. You did mention that there's a history in Pittsburgh and under Mike Tomlin of having a bell cow running back, and I think that does lean in favor of Najee Harris. But when we look at the previous bell cows, like Le'Veon Bell, he was efficient damn near every year that he was their running back. Not something that we've seen from Najee Harris so far. And then you had James Conner after that. He wasn't very efficient. James Conner's never really been that efficient, but also he was only the true quote unquote bell cow for 1 year in that Pittsburgh offense. The following years he was under, let me check because I think I have it pulled up in front of me. He had 1 year in 2018.
Yeah, that should have been
sure
that should have been the 2017-2018 season that James Conner was there starting.
Yeah, he had 1 year in 2018 where he was over 200 touches. That was the only time he was over 200 touches for the Pittsburgh Steelers. He still was under 1,000 yards rushing. He did have a lot of touchdowns. But then in 2019 and 2020, he didn't ever eclipse 170 carries again. So he was never really the bell cow again for that team. Obviously, Najee Harris has a huge investment. He was drafted very highly. And so I do think that will lean in his favor in terms of them continuing to give him all of the opportunity. But I think if he continues to be inefficient and can't be creative, can't break tackles, can't make more than what he's given with these plays, I don't see him getting like a big extension after his rookie contract. So if we're talking dynasty wise, I don't know that his longevity, at least in terms of being a bell cow and being that true workhorse guy in any offense, wherever he ends up, is going to continue into the future.
I think that's absolutely true, but he has the advantage of, like, he's got, what, 2-3 years left to figure it out, really, on his rookie deal?
I guess that's true.
So he's got, like, 3 years to
check
figure
while you're
this
talking
out.
about him.
Yeah, because he's only going into his third year, first-round pick. Should be. But either
Fifth-year
way,
option,
yeah.
yeah.
Like, he's got some time to figure it out. I don't think the team's going to throw him away immediately if, like, he doesn't do well this year. I think they're still, like, going to say, all right, there's some growing pains here. He's our first-round guy. He stayed relatively healthy. Like, I don't think he's, like, an injury tag guy at all. I think he's been pretty durable so far. He has dealt with some injury, but he plays through a lot of injury as well. So he's definitely tough. But yeah, I just really think I think he's got time to prove himself, to be honest with you, in this offense.
Yeah, so I don't disagree. I'm looking at Spotrac right now for his contract situation. It was a 4-year deal, not
okay.
Well, actually, is this a 5th-year option? I guess technically this is a team option, isn't it? With the base salary.
It should be with the first round pick, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. But so he's under contract for this year and 2024, and then I believe there's a team option in 2025. But by that time, he'll already be 27 because he was an older prospect.
That's
coming
true.
out.
That is true. Also,
his rookie year, he was already 23 because I think was he a 5th year at Alabama, or was it just a senior coming out?
I think just the senior coming out, but I can check.
Okay. But either way, he wasn't an early declare coming out of Alabama. Man, I'm stumbling over my words. And so, yeah, he was 23 his rookie season. By the time he reaches that team option, he'll already be 27 years old. So it'll be interesting to see where the team wants to go with that. But let's get a little bit more specific here. If you guys are interested in the content that Will and I make, we do have our own separate YouTube channel called the FF Ballbusters, also on YouTube. That'll be linked in the description below if you're interested in checking it out. The reason I bring it up is because we recently made a Dynasty tier list for running backs. And that's kind of where this discussion all started. The reason that we brought up Najee Harris in this first edition of Fantasy Court. We were trying to figure out where he should be ranked. And I believe we ended up putting him as the RB13 in the C tier. So we had S, A, B, and C. With all of what we've said now, going as in depth as we have and fleshing everything out the way that we did, do you think that that's still reasonable? Would you adjust in any way, up or down? How do you feel?
I think it's still reasonable for the moment. Because like we said, he really just needs to prove that he can do something out there. Because his potential, just based on the volume that he gets on that team, it's very high because he is the bell cow for that team, or at least they were trying to treat him as such. And if he can't, like you said, if he can prove that he can handle that role and they can roll forward doing that, his potential is pretty sky high with this team, just based on volume alone. But his efficiency needs to get better, for sure, you know?
Oh, there you are. I lost you for a second.
I was about to say, it froze for me too. I just saw you were just, I was like, Eric is
weird.
not fucking with what I'm saying at all.
No, you said, I heard his potential is sky high, and that's when you cut out.
Okay, so I'll start over.
Okay, my bad.
No, you're good. Fuck.
So the initial question, the way that I set you up, was basically like, we ranked him as RB13 in the C
Right.
tier. Would you adjust, or do you feel that's about right?
I feel like I would keep him about where we had him at. Maybe bump him up slightly, just because he does have the volume that he has, but he does need to prove that he can handle the volume that he has and be more efficient with it. Because if he can do that and he can make that happen, the sky is the limit. That's kind of what I was getting into right there. The sky's the limit if he can get that efficiency together and if this offensive line is better, and if he can, be more creative, really. Just learn a little bit more. He's been proven that he does like to learn. He does look into a lot of film. He does do a lot of the work himself, trying to figure out how to play and his play style, this and that. But, okay.
Yeah.
We got a smile cracking over there. What's up?
So I partially agree. I don't necessarily agree with the fact that he's... I won't say magically, because that's just rude. He's not going to, out of nowhere...
Get
become
better,
more creative. It's not that he can't get better. He can become a better running back, but he's not gonna, I don't know, he's not gonna significantly change his agility or his broken tackle ability. Like he's at the size that he is. He's at his athletic peak. Like he's not gonna develop further.
That's true.
Into a more athletic, whatever the case. Like you can be more savvy. You can get better at like reading your holes and stuff like that, and that could lead to more efficiency for sure. But if we're talking about creativity as a runner, I don't necessarily see that improving on its own. I do think you made a good point about the offensive line play, and I do think that that's going to be dramatically better than what he's seen really ever throughout his career so far in Pittsburgh, and that could lead to a decent bump for him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also pretty much in the same boat where, like, maybe not for all the same reasons that I thought of when we made that video initially, but I do think he's ranked pretty appropriately.
Yeah.
The guys above him, I still think have a higher ceiling than him, just because they are incredibly efficient. They are incredibly explosive. We have guys like Tony Pollard, Ramondre Stevenson, Austin Eckler in that tier above him. Tony Pollard coming into a bigger role, and he's shown us how explosive and efficient he is. Ramondre Stevenson also in that workhorse capacity. He's actually in a fairly similar situation to what we're talking about with Najee Harris. So those two I could see maybe getting a little bit closer together. And then Eckler, just with the incredible receiving volume in a much, much better and higher paced offense. So I don't know that he necessarily touches Eckler. But yeah, I think that RB13 in that C tier is probably fairly reasonable. I think we're right about in line with the Dynasty community. I'm looking at Keep Trade Cut right now, and I believe he's also RB13 there. So it's funny that, like, we made that video. I saw a bunch of talk on Twitter of people talking negatively about him, people talking positively about him, and I was like, all right, let's get into this conversation. And then we kind of ended up back in the exact same spot that we started in.
Yeah. I mean, it is what it is when it comes to a lot of these players, too. Like you said, we've been watching every day, so it makes sense that our opinions didn't change that much. But I feel like we're always coming up with new reasons, new data, new analysis to look into these players with. So it makes sense that our opinions always change, but maybe the placement doesn't change too much because it's just reinforcing those statements already.
Right. But yeah, that'll do it for me. I don't have too much else to say on Najee's behalf. Do you have anything else you want to get to before we wrap up here?
No, that's all I really got. Make sure you guys do all that great YouTube stuff. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you know whenever we drop new videos over here. Hit that like button so that way you guys can support us, push our stuff out there to more people. And like we said before, you guys are the jury, so let us know down below which side you ended up on. Is Najee Harris worth having on a team, or is he somebody you want to offload and hope that some other person in the league has him? Let us know down below in the comments, and just let us know who else it is you want us to take into fantasy court. If there's anybody you guys want to see specifically, let us know down below, and we will get into it, and we'll just kind of figure it out from there. And hope you guys like the series, and hope you guys like the content.
Absolutely. And lastly, before we get out of here, just a quick reminder, we are sponsored by Underdog, so go check the link in the description down below. We do have a promo code FFLW to get a 100% deposit match over there. So Underdog is a great platform. Go use that promo code. Also check out our personal channel if you enjoyed what we brought you guys today. That is FF Ballbusters on YouTube, also linked in the description below. But yeah, I think that's all I got. So thank you for watching till the end. If you did, as always, we love you, and we'll catch you in the next video. Peace.